So I just watched this really interesting interview that Jon Stewart did with, I think his first name is pronounced Ruy, not Roy, but like Ruy Teixeira, who works for the American Enterprise Institute, and they were talking about why they think, Harris lost. And, part of Teixeira's argument was, the Democrats' obsession with like DEI and wokeness was part of it. And he says like economics and immigration were definitely like more, were definitely more important, but like that, that obsession with kind of culture played a contributing factor. And I've seen that argument a lot, and Stewart pushed back on it with a couple of really good, I thought, good points. I've seen like a lot of people argue like, well, Harris never mentioned this stuff, right? Which is true. And actually, if like you follow politics closely enough, you'll notice like most mainstream Democrats basically haven't mentioned it at all in the last 2 years. So clearly like the memo got out that like, look, talking about these policies, talking about, obsessing about gender pronouns, this is just all like a losing issue for us. So they didn't talk about it. And so then the argument goes, well, if they haven't been mentioning it, like, how could that possibly be a contributing factor? But I think, to most people, like most people aren't like that politically engaged, right? Most people are not like watching the news every day. They're not following like political podcasts for the most part. So like, I do think, even though she didn't mention it, and Trump did, like, obviously, the Trump campaign did their best to like remind voters of it, that they them ad, but it's pretty. I do think like the Democrats basically paid a price for like getting so close with it in like 2020, like kind of 4 or 5 years ago, and then that's kind of like all like a lot of median voters, the swing voters, like kind of like what they remember, like that's the Democratic brand, like they're for these kind of like weird social issues that you need to have like taken like college, like undergrad and like graduate level classes to understand. And even then, like, they're kind of nonsense. So I think that's part of it, even though, again, like, Democrats rightly understood that was a losing issue for them, and they didn't mention it. But what they didn't do also was anything to kind of replace that narrative. Like, they didn't then come out and say, you know what, like, we are for rights for all people. We believe, that adults have, the right to love who they want and marry who they want. And if so, like, transition if they want to. But also, like, we understand that, and some Democrats did this, like Colin Aldred did this. But, not many national Democrats came out and said, like, you know what, we understand it's probably not a good idea for trans women to play, trans women to play in girl sports. Like, it's just kind of like a basic, like, yeah, it doesn't affect anyone, honestly. It's probably an easy thing to nullify if, like, enough national Democrats, including the candidate, came out and said, like, yeah, you know what, like, it's a difficult issue. We want to try and figure out something, but, like, in the meantime, it just can't, like, make sense that, like, that doesn't happen. And they didn't say that. So, like, I think in a vacuum, the Democrats' previous obsession with this, even though, again, I think behind closed doors, almost all of them understand, like, this is not a winning issue. Without coming out and kind of, like, replacing that narrative with anything, I do think a lot of people still kind of had that in their head, like, she must be for this weird gender stuff. She must be for, like, kind of racial policies that maybe I don't agree with, or, this obsession over equity versus equality. And I don't know, maybe like the median voter has like no fucking clue about that stuff, but I do kind of think, like, in the absence of any other narrative, that stuff kind of basically, even though she didn't mention it, her campaign got tagged with that.